I came home on Christmas Day. The house was empty except for my son-in-law's elderly father sitting in a wheelchair, while my family's laughter echoed from somewhere far away. The note on my kitchen counter made my blood freeze. Took the kids on a surprise cruise to the Bahamas. Frank didn't want to go. Take care of him for us. Back New Year's Day. Love, Sarah, and Mark. 3 weeks. They'd left an 84-year-old man alone for 3 weeks like he was a houseplant. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up discovering that my own daughter had abandoned not just me, but her husband's elderly father on the most important holiday of the year. I'd spent Christmas Eve at my sister's house in Phoenix, helping with her grandkids and trying not to think about how empty my own house felt since my husband died. When Sarah called that morning, she sounded rushed. "Mom, change of plans. We're leaving town tonight. Family emergency." She hung up before I could ask questions. Something felt wrong, but Sarah had always been dramatic. I caught the first flight home Christmas morning, my arms full of presents I'd spent months choosing. Emma's art supplies, Jack's video games, something special for each grandchild I barely got to see anymore. The house was supposed to be full of noise and chaos, turkey in the oven, kids arguing over board games. Instead, I found Frank Morrison forgotten like yesterday's newspaper. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said quietly when I knelt beside his wheelchair. His voice was steady, but his eyes held a fire I hadn't expected. "I've been waiting for you." "Frank, what happened? Where did they go?" He smiled then, and it wasn't pleasant. "Oh, they went on their cruise all right, but not because of any emergency." He pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "Mark forgot I could still use this thing. Would you like to see what your daughter really thinks of us?" The text message thread made me sick. Mark to Sarah. "Perfect timing with Mom's trip. Dad won't know we're gone, and the old bat will be stuck babysitting when she gets back. 2 birds, 1 stone. Sarah's response. "Genius. She's been so clingy since Dad died. This'll teach her we don't revolve around her schedule." I read it twice, my hands trembling. My own daughter calling me clingy, planning to use me as unpaid elderly care while they lived it up in paradise. "There's more," Frank said softly. "Much more. They've been planning this for months, Dorothy. We're both just inconveniences to them now." I looked into his eyes and saw my own hurt reflected there. 2 discarded parents, forgotten and dismissed by the children we'd raised and sacrificed for. "What do you say we remind them exactly what they've thrown away?" Frank asked. I nodded, feeling something cold and determined settle in my chest. "What did you have in mind?" "Oh, my dear," Frank's smile turned predatory. "We have 3 weeks and nothing but time. By the time they get back, they'll understand exactly what abandoning family really costs." That's when I realized our Christmas gift to each other would be watching our ungrateful children learn the hardest lesson of their lives. Frank Morrison wasn't the frail, confused old man I'd expected. As he maneuvered his wheelchair into my kitchen with surprising agility, I realized I'd been seeing exactly what my daughter wanted me to see. "Coffee?" I asked, still processing the bomb he'd dropped about Sarah and Mark's real plans. "Please, and sit down, Dorothy. We have work to do." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. Good. I was tired of being the sweet, accommodating mother who absorbed every slight with a smile. "How long have you known?" I asked, pouring coffee into my best china. If we were planning war, we might as well use the good stuff. "Known what specifically? That my son married your daughter for her inheritance? That they've been slowly isolating us both? Or that they're planning to put me in a nursing home the minute I become too inconvenient?" My cup rattled against the saucer. "Sarah wouldn't she?" Frank pulled out a folder from the bag hanging on his wheelchair. "I may be old, Dorothy, but I'm not stupid. When you spend enough time being invisible, you learn to pay attention." He spread papers across my table. Bank statements, real estate documents, legal papers. My daughter's handwriting on several notes about managing the oldsters and liquidating assets when the time comes. "They've been planning this for 2 years, Frank continued. "Since your husband died and you became a wealthy widow. Mark convinced Sarah to move in with you, ostensibly to help with your grief. Really, they were positioning themselves." I thought about how eagerly Sarah had insisted on moving back home after Dad's funeral. How Mark had been so helpful with my finances, so concerned about my well-being. The way they'd gradually taken over decisions about my own house, "They're stealing from me," I whispered. "Not stealing. Planning to inherit early. Sarah's been slowly convincing you to add their names to your accounts, hasn't she? Joint ownership of the house? Updated will?" Every conversation came flooding back. Sarah's gentle suggestions about simplifying things and making sure the family is protected. Mark's helpful comments about tax implications and estate planning. "I haven't signed anything yet," I said. Frank's smile was sharp. "Neither have I. Mark's been after me to sign over power of attorney. Keeps talking about how worried he is about my mental state. But you're completely lucid." "I am. Which is why this little vacation of theirs is going to backfire spectacularly." I leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing? They expect to come home to two grateful, dependent old people who've bonded over our abandonment. Instead, they're going to find that we've had time to really get to know each other, to share information, to make some calls." "What kind of calls?" Frank's eyes gleamed. "Well, for starters, I thought you might be interested to know that Mark's been having an affair with his secretary for 8 months. I have photographs." The coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. "Sarah's husband cheating? My daughter didn't know?" "She doesn't know," Frank continued, reading my expression. "But she's about to, along with some other fascinating details about their finances that I think will surprise her." "Did you know they've been using your credit cards for their little getaways?" I hadn't known. I'd trusted them with my accounts, my passwords, my entire financial life, the way I'd trusted them with my heart. "I also took the liberty of calling their cruise line," Frank added casually. "Seems there's been a family emergency. Their grandfather had a stroke. They need to come home immediately." "But you haven't had a stroke." "Not yet, but I could develop symptoms very quickly if needed, especially if someone called the authorities about elder abandonment." I stared at this man I'd known for 5 years, but never really seen. "You're diabolical." "I prefer thorough. The question is, Dorothy, are you ready to stop being a victim?" I looked around my kitchen, my home that my daughter had been slowly claiming piece by piece, at the presents under the tree that would never be opened, at the future I'd imagined with grandchildren who barely knew my name because their parents kept me at arm's length. "What do you need me to do?" Frank's smile was beautiful and terrible. "First, we're going to secure your assets. Then we're going to document everything. And finally, we're going to make some strategic phone calls that will cut their cruise very short indeed. They'll be furious." "Good. It's time they learned what real consequences feel like." That's when I understood that Christmas morning hadn't brought me just an abandoned old man. It had delivered me the perfect partner for the most satisfying revenge of my life. By December 28th, Frank and I had transformed my quiet house into a command center for justified revenge. The dining room table was covered with evidence. Bank statements showing unauthorized purchases, photographs of Mark with his secretary, and a timeline of lies my daughter had told me over the past 2 years. "They've charged $4,000 to your account just this month," Frank said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the credit card statements. "Restaurants you've never been to, a jewelry store, something called Tropical Paradise Swimwear." I felt sick. They bought vacation clothes with my money to go on a vacation they didn't invite me to. "It gets better. Look at this." Frank handed me a phone bill. "Mark's been paying for his secretary's cell phone for 6 months. Guess whose credit card he used?" "Mine." They'd used my money to fund his affair while abandoning both of us on Christmas. The betrayal was so complete, it almost felt artistic. "Frank, I need to ask you something," I said, pouring us more coffee. We'd been surviving on caffeine and fury for 3 days. "Why are you helping me? You barely know me." He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the neighborhood where all the other families were probably enjoying normal holiday visits. "My wife died 2 years ago. Dorothy was her name, actually. Funny coincidence. I didn't know her name was Dorothy. She was everything to me. When she got sick, I told Mark we needed to sell the house, use our savings for her care. He convinced me to wait, said he'd handle everything. He had a better plan." Frank's voice got harder. "His better plan was to let Medicare cover the cheapest possible care while he moved us into a facility and sold our house. Dorothy died in a place that smelled like disinfectant and despair because I trusted my son. Frank, I'm so sorry. He promised me Dorothy would come home, promised we'd have time together. Instead, I got 3 more months with a woman who didn't recognize me anymore because we couldn't afford the medication that might have slowed her decline. Now I understood the steel in his eyes. This wasn't just about Christmas abandonment. This was about a son who'd let his mother die in misery while protecting his inheritance. "Your daughter may not know about the affair," Frank continued, "but she knew about this cruise. She planned it knowing we'd be alone. That makes her just as guilty as Mark." My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Having amazing time. Weather perfect. Hope you and Frank are getting along." 3 happy face emojis. Not a single question about how we were managing or if we needed anything. "They have no idea what's coming," I said. "Oh, but they're about to." Frank pulled out his phone. "I called the cruise line this morning. Told them there'd been a family emergency. Mark's father had a stroke and needed him home immediately. Will they believe it? They already have. The ship is docking in Nassau tomorrow. Mark and Sarah have been informed they need to fly home immediately for a medical emergency." I felt a thrill of dark satisfaction. They'll be panicked. They should be. By the time they get home, they'll discover that panic is the least of their problems. Frank wheeled himself over to the folder we'd labeled Evidence. "I've been documenting everything for months. Mark's affair, their financial manipulation, the forged signatures on documents they thought I wouldn't notice." "Forged signatures? They've been practicing your signature, Dorothy. I found the papers. They were planning to transfer your house into joint ownership while you were confused by grief." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "How long have you been planning this?" "I wasn't planning anything. I was just an old man trying to survive my son's neglect. But when you walked through that door Christmas morning and I saw the same hurt in your eyes that I felt, I realized something." Frank's smile was predatory. "Revenge is always better with a partner. What's our next move?" "Tomorrow. When they call in a panic about coming home, you're going to be very, very concerned about me. My stroke symptoms will be quite convincing. And then? Then we make sure their homecoming is everything they deserve." Frank pulled out one more document that made my blood freeze. It was a nursing home application with my name on it, in my daughter's handwriting, but with my forged signature. "They were planning to put me away too?" I whispered. "Eventually. But first, they needed to make sure you signed over everything to them. Can't transfer assets from a nursing home as easily." That's when I realized my daughter hadn't just abandoned me for Christmas. She'd been planning to erase me entirely. "Frank," I said quietly, "how much time do we have?" "They land tomorrow evening, which gives us exactly 24 hours to prepare for the most educational homecoming of their lives." "Perfect, because I just figured out exactly how to make them pay for everything they've done." The call came at 6:47 a.m. on December 29th, just as Frank and I were finalizing our preparations. Sarah's voice was shrill with panic when I answered the phone. "Mom, oh my God, we just got word that Frank had a stroke. How is he? Why didn't you call us immediately?" I looked at Frank, who was calmly sipping coffee and appeared healthier than men half his age. He'd coached me on exactly what to say. "Sarah, honey, it happened so fast," I said, injecting my voice with just the right amount of overwhelmed elderly confusion. "He collapsed yesterday evening. I called 911, and they took him to General Hospital. The doctors say, oh, sweetheart, they say it's very serious. Is he conscious? Can he speak?" Frank held up a sign he'd made. "Barely responsive. Right side paralysis." "He's barely responsive," I continued. "The right side of his body isn't working properly. The doctors are running tests, but they want the family here immediately. We're flying out today. We'll be home by tonight." "Mom, you sound exhausted." "I've been at the hospital all night. I didn't want him to be alone." There was silence on the other end. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was softer. "That was really good of you, Mom. We'll be there as soon as we can." After I hung up, Frank and I sat in satisfied silence for a moment. "You're a natural at this," he said. 25 years of marriage taught me how to manage dramatic situations. Your son has no idea what he's dealing with. Speaking of Mark, he'll want to see medical records immediately. Are you ready for Phase 2? Phase 2 was beautiful in its simplicity. Frank had a friend, Dr. Peterson, who'd treated his wife Dorothy during her illness. Dr. Peterson happened to be quite sympathetic to elderly patients who'd been mistreated by their families. Dr. Peterson confirmed that he can admit me for observation this afternoon, Frank explained. Heart palpitations brought on by stress. He'll keep me overnight for monitoring. That's brilliant. By the time they get here, you'll actually be in the hospital. with genuine medical concerns caused by the trauma of abandonment. It's not even entirely a lie. While Frank made final arrangements with his doctor friend, I tackled the more delicate task of preparing Sarah's surprise. I'd spent the night going through every financial document, every credit card statement, every piece of evidence of their betrayal. The photographs Frank had given me of Mark's affair were particularly damning. Mark and his secretary Janet at a restaurant I'd unknowingly paid for. Mark and Janet checking into a hotel room during what was supposed to be a business trip. Mark and Janet Christmas shopping for jewelry that had appeared under our tree as his gift to Sarah. But the documents were what would really destroy them. I'd found the nursing home application with my forged signature, the practice sheets where Sarah had been perfecting my handwriting, the real estate documents they'd prepared to transfer my house into joint ownership. They were so confident I'd never find out, I told Frank. They thought I was just a confused old widow who'd sign anything they put in front of me. Underestimating us was their first mistake, Frank replied. Abandoning us was their second. But the biggest mistake was thinking we'd just accept being disposed of quietly. At 2 p.m., Frank left for the hospital in an ambulance Dr. Peterson had arranged. To any neighbor watching, it looked like a genuine medical emergency. I followed in my car, playing the distraught family friend. Frank was settled into a private room with impressive-looking monitors and IV equipment. Dr. Peterson briefed me on the condition I should describe to Mark and Sarah. Stroke-like symptoms brought on by severe emotional distress, he explained. We're monitoring for heart complications. Very serious for a man his age who's been under tremendous stress. How long can you keep him here? As long as necessary for his recovery. Elderly abandonment is a serious trigger for health crises. I've seen it before. By 5 p.m., I was back home, waiting. Their flight would land at 8 p.m. They'd come straight to the hospital, where they'd find Frank looking genuinely frail and connected to legitimate medical equipment. But first, they'd have to stop at home to drop off their luggage, which is where they'd find the surprise I'd prepared on my dining room table. Every piece of evidence, every photograph, every forged document, arranged in neat piles with sticky notes in my handwriting, explaining exactly what each item represented. The credit card statements with their charges, highlighted in red. The photos of Mark's affair. The nursing home application with Sarah's signature practice sheets right beside it. And in the center of it all, a single sheet of paper with a message I'd written in my best penmanship. Welcome home. We need to talk. I'll be at the hospital with Frank, who had a stress-induced medical crisis after you abandoned him. Take your time reviewing the materials on the table. We have all the time in the world to discuss your plans for our futures. Love, Mom. At 8:47 p.m., my phone rang. Sarah's number. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came at 8:52. Mark's number. Voicemail again. By 9:15, I had 6 frantic messages and a dozen text messages. All variations of, "What is this? Call us immediately. We can explain everything." But Frank and I weren't ready for explanations yet. We were just getting started. They arrived at the hospital at 10:23 p.m., looking like they'd aged 10 years in 6 hours. Sarah's face was blotchy from crying, and Mark looked like he'd seen a ghost. Good. They were beginning to understand the situation. I was sitting beside Frank's bed when they burst into the room. He looked appropriately frail under the hospital lighting, though his eyes were sharp and alert. "Mom, what the hell was all that stuff on your table?" Sarah demanded, then caught herself when she saw Frank. "I mean, how is he?" "The doctors are cautiously optimistic," I said quietly, but it was touch and go for a while. The stress of being abandoned triggered some serious cardiac issues. Mark moved closer to Frank's bedside. "Dad, can you hear me?" Frank's eyes opened slowly. When he spoke, his voice was deliberately weak. "Mark, you came back?" "Of course I came back. Dad, I'm so sorry. We thought you'd be fine. It was just supposed to be a few days." "Few days?" Frank's voice gained strength. "You left me alone for Christmas, in a wheelchair, without medication reminders or proper food or any way to contact anyone if something happened." "Dad, we left you with Dorothy. You left me with a note telling her to babysit me like I was a pet." Frank's monitors started beeping faster. "Do you have any idea what it feels like to be abandoned by your own son?" Sarah stepped forward. "Frank, we're sorry. We really are. But Mom, I need to talk to you about what we found at the house." "You mean the evidence of your theft?" The photos of your husband's affair? Or maybe the nursing home application with my forged signature? Sarah's face went white. Mark started to speak, but I held up my hand. Sit down, both of you. They sat in the uncomfortable plastic chairs like children called to the principal's office. Let's start with the easy stuff, I continued. Mark, would you like to explain to your wife why you've been charging romantic dinners with Janet from your office to my credit card? Mark's mouth opened and closed without sound. Sarah turned to stare at him. Or Sarah, perhaps you'd like to tell Mark about the nursing home application you filled out for me. The one where you practiced my signature until you could forge it perfectly? Mom, that's not what it looks like. It looks like fraud. Frank, what does it look like to you? Frank had managed to sit up more in bed, looking stronger by the minute. It looks like two people who plan to systematically rob and abandon their elderly parents. That's not true, Sarah protested. We were just trying to help manage things. Mom, you've been so confused since Dad died. Confused enough to not notice my own credit cards being used for your vacation wardrobe? Confused enough to not realize you've been stealing from me for 2 years? I pulled out my phone and showed them the banking app. I've been tracking every charge, every withdrawal, every transaction. Would you like to know how much you've stolen? Mark finally found his voice. It's not stealing when it's family helping family. $47,000, I continued. That's how much you've charged to my accounts without permission in the past 2 years. Plus the $12,000 you've been borrowing from my checking account for your mortgage payments. Sarah's face crumpled. Mom, we were going to pay it back. When? After you had me declared incompetent and transferred my assets? After you put me in a facility and sold my house? We never wanted to put you in a facility, Frank laughed. A sound without humor. Then why did you fill out the application? Why did you practice her signature? Why did you research places that would take both of us? The silence in the room was deafening, except for the steady beep of Frank's monitors. You want to know what really hurts? I asked quietly. It's not the money. It's not even the lies. It's that you thought I was too stupid to figure it out. You thought you could manipulate me because I'm old and I loved you. Sarah started crying again. Mom, please, we can fix this. We can pay everything back. With what money? The money you don't have because you've been living beyond your means for years? The money you were planning to steal from us? Mark stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're both fine. Dad's obviously feeling better. This whole thing has been blown out of proportion. Sit down, Mark, Frank said, and something in his voice made Mark comply immediately. We're not done. Actually, I said, checking my watch. We are done for tonight. Visiting hours are over. Frank needs his rest. But we need to talk about this. Tomorrow. Come to my house at 10 a.m., both of you. We'll discuss the terms of your rehabilitation. Terms? Sarah looked confused. Oh yes, Frank said with a smile that would have scared a shark. You didn't think you could just apologize and go back to business as usual, did you? I stood up and gathered my purse. See you in the morning. Sleep well. As I walked out, I heard Sarah whisper to Mark, what do you think they're planning? If they had to ask, they really didn't know us at all. But they were about to learn. Frank was discharged the next morning with a clean bill of health and a doctor's note stating his episode had been caused by acute stress from family abandonment. Dr. Peterson was thorough in his documentation, bless him. At exactly 10 a.m., Sarah and Mark knocked on my door. They looked like they hadn't slept. Frank was already positioned in the living room, the coffee table covered with neat stacks of evidence. Please sit down, I said graciously, as if we were having a normal family meeting. Coffee? Mom, we just want to fix this, Sarah said immediately. Whatever you want us to do, we'll do it. That's good to hear. Frank, would you like to start? Frank folded his hands in his lap. I've been thinking about trust, how it's built over years and destroyed in moments. Mark, I trusted you with my financial information because you're my son. I trusted you to care about my well-being. Dad, I do care. You cared so much you left me alone on Christmas without checking if I had enough medication. You cared so much you've been forging my signature on documents I've never seen. You cared so much you've been paying for your girlfriend's expenses with my credit card. Mark's face flushed. That's not... Janet isn't... Janet Crawford, 5'6", blonde, works in your office, drives a red Honda Civic that you've been paying the insurance on. Should I continue? Sarah looked like she'd been slapped. Mark, is this true? Sarah, it's complicated. It's not complicated at all, I interrupted. You've been cheating on my daughter with money stolen from your father. That's actually very simple. And you, Frank continued, looking at Sarah, have been preparing to have your mother declared incompetent so you could steal her house. It wasn't stealing. I was trying to protect her assets by practicing her signature, by researching nursing homes, by preparing legal documents to transfer ownership of her property. Sarah started crying again. You don't understand. We're in debt. Mark's business is failing. You needed to rob your elderly parents, Frank finished, because taking responsibility for your own lives was too difficult. I stood up and walked to the window. My neighbors were out walking their dogs, living normal lives where children didn't plot against their parents. Here's what's going to happen, I said without turning around. Mark, you're going to end your affair immediately. You're going to pay back every penny you've stolen from both Frank and me, and you're going to move out of Sarah's house. Mom, you can't break up our marriage. I'm not breaking up anything. Mark's affair broke up your marriage. I'm just acknowledging reality. I turned back to face them. Sarah, you're going to resign from all my accounts. You're going to return my credit cards and destroy any copies you've made. You're going to remove your name from any documents you've added it to without my permission. But Mom, who's going to help you manage your finances? Frank and I exchanged a look. Frank and I have decided to help each other. We're both perfectly capable of managing our own affairs. You're moving in together? Mark looked horrified. We're exploring our options, Frank said smoothly. Dorothy has a beautiful house with plenty of room. I have resources and companionship to offer. It seems like a practical arrangement. The truth was, we'd discussed this. Not romantically, but practically. Two people who'd been discarded by their families, pooling resources and providing mutual support. It made sense. This is insane, Mark said. Dad, you barely know her. I know she didn't abandon me on Christmas. I know she didn't steal from me. I know she doesn't think I'm a burden to be managed. That's more than I can say about my son. Sarah was crying harder now. Mom, please, we made mistakes, but we're family. You can't just cut us off. I'm not cutting you off, I said gently. I'm establishing boundaries. You can earn your way back into our lives by demonstrating that you understand what family actually means. How? Mark's voice was small. Start by paying back the money. All of it. Then start treating us like human beings instead of problems to be solved. Frank pulled out a document from his folder. We've prepared a payment plan. Based on your combined income, you can pay back the $59,000 you've stolen from us over the next 5 years. $59,000? Sarah gasped. That includes interest and fees for the unauthorized use of credit cards, I explained. Frank did the math. He's very good with numbers. Mark stared at the payment schedule. This will mean no vacations, no new furniture, no luxuries purchased with stolen money, Frank agreed. You'll have to live within your actual means. Revolutionary concept. I sat back down across from them. You have two choices. Accept these terms and work to rebuild our trust, or reject them and continue your lives without us. But if you choose the second option, understand that we'll be pressing charges for fraud and theft. You'd send us to jail? Sarah whispered. We'd let the justice system handle the consequences of your choices, Frank corrected, just like we're doing now. They sat in stunned silence, finally understanding that we weren't the helpless elderly people they'd thought they were manipulating. We need time to think, Mark finally said. Of course. You have until tomorrow at noon to give us your decision. After they left, Frank and I sat quietly for a few minutes. Think they'll agree? He asked. They don't have a choice. The alternative is criminal charges. And if they try to call our bluff? I smiled. Then they'll discover we're not bluffing. Frank nodded approvingly. I never thought Christmas could feel this satisfying. We're not done yet. Tomorrow is when they'll really learn what happens when you betray family. They didn't wait until noon. At 8 a.m. on December 31st, my doorbell rang with the desperation of people who'd spent the night calculating exactly how screwed they were. Sarah stood on my porch alone, looking like she'd aged a decade overnight. Where's Mark? I asked, not inviting her in yet. Gone. He packed a bag and left last night. Her voice was hollow. Said he couldn't deal with the pressure and needed space to think. Frank wheeled himself to the door behind me. Interesting timing. Did he take anything valuable with him? Sarah's laugh was bitter. He cleaned out our checking account, about $2,000. Everything else is frozen because of the investigation you triggered. I hadn't triggered any investigation yet, but I didn't correct her assumption. Let her think the wheels were already in motion. So he abandoned you too, Frank observed. Seems to be his pattern. I deserve this, Sarah said quietly. All of it. But Mom, I need you to know something. The nursing home thing, the signature practice, that was all Mark's idea. He convinced me you were showing signs of dementia. And you believed him without consulting a doctor? Without talking to me? He showed me things. Times you forgot conversations we'd had, bills you'd paid twice, your confusion about your medication schedule after Dad died. I stared at my daughter. Sarah, I wasn't confused. I was grieving. There's a difference. I know that now. But Mark kept saying we needed to protect you from yourself before something bad happened. He made it sound like love. Frank and I exchanged glances. This was a wrinkle we hadn't expected. Come in, I said finally. Tell us everything. Over coffee, Sarah laid out 2 years of manipulation that made my stomach turn. Mark had been documenting every normal grief behavior, every small memory lapse, every moment of confusion as evidence of mental decline. He'd convinced Sarah that I was becoming dangerous to myself. He said you'd left the stove on twice, that you'd gotten lost driving to the grocery store, that you'd called him at 3 a.m. asking where Dad was. None of that happened. I know that now. But at the time, he seemed so concerned, so protective of you. He said we needed to act before you hurt yourself or lost everything to scammers. Frank leaned forward. What changed your mind? When we got home yesterday and I saw all those documents, all that evidence you'd gathered, I realized that someone with dementia couldn't have organized all of that, couldn't have tracked every transaction, every lie, every theft. You'd been watching us the whole time. Not the whole time, I admitted. Just since I started feeling like something was wrong, about 6 months ago. The credit card statements were the first clue, Frank added. When I found charges for restaurants in towns where Mark claimed to be on business alone. Sarah winced. How long have you known about Janet? Since August. I hired a private investigator. You hired a private investigator? Sarah looked stunned. I may be old, but I'm not helpless. When someone starts stealing from me, I investigate. Why didn't you just confront us? Frank answered that one. Because we needed evidence. Accusations are just noise without proof. Sarah sat quietly for a long moment. So what happens now? Mark's gone. I can't afford the house payments without his income. And I still owe you almost $60,000. That depends, I said. Are you here to negotiate, or are you here to take responsibility? I want to take responsibility. But Mom, I need help. Real help. Not just punishment. This was the moment Frank and I had discussed. The difference between revenge and justice. Revenge would have been watching her lose everything. Justice was giving her a chance to rebuild properly. Here's what we're going to do, I said. You're going to move back home. Not to take care of me, but so we can take care of each other. You'll pay me reasonable rent, which will go toward paying back what you owe. And Mark? Mark made his choice when he ran instead of facing consequences. You're making yours right now. Sarah started crying again. But these tears were different. Relief instead of desperation. There are conditions, Frank added. Full financial transparency. No access to your mother's accounts without written permission and witnesses. And counseling to figure out how you let someone convince you to betray your own mother. I'll do anything. Good. Because we're also pressing charges against Mark. His theft, his fraud, his abandonment, all of it. You can cooperate with the investigation or be charged as an accomplice. Your choice. Sarah's face went pale. He'll blame me for everything. Then you'd better make sure your story is accurate and documented. Frank pulled out another folder. We've been busy, Sarah. Mark's pattern of financial manipulation goes back years. Janet isn't his first affair, and you weren't his first victim. We found 2 other women he'd convinced to give him access to their money. What are you saying? We're saying your husband is a professional con artist who targeted women with resources. You just happened to come with the bonus of an elderly mother with assets. The room went silent except for the ticking of my father's old clock. Sarah stared at the documents Frank had spread across the table. So I wasn't just stupid. she whispered. I was a mark. You were both, I said gently. But stupid can be fixed. Mark's criminal behavior is his problem now. When do we start? Sarah asked. We already have. Welcome to the first day of your actual adult life. Frank smiled. This is going to be more satisfying than I expected. But none of us knew that Mark hadn't just run away. He was planning his own revenge, and he'd decided that if he was going down, he was taking all of us with him. On January 2nd, I woke up to find my front lawn covered with toilet paper and my mailbox smashed. Frank, who'd stayed the night in my guest room to help Sarah move in, wheeled himself to the window with a cup of coffee and a grimly satisfied expression. Mark? I asked. Mark, he confirmed. Subtle as always. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, still in her pajamas, and surveyed the damage. He used to do this to his ex-girlfriends when they broke up with him. I thought it was funny then. It's not vandalism we need to worry about, Frank said quietly. It's what else he might do when he realizes we're serious about the charges. He was right to be concerned. At 10 a.m., Detective Morrison from the county sheriff's office called to inform me that Mark had filed a complaint claiming Frank and I were running an elaborate elder abuse scam against Sarah. He says you've been manipulating his wife, Mrs. Sullivan. Claims you've isolated her from her support system and convinced her to turn against him. He's requesting a welfare check. When would be convenient for you, Detective? I asked calmly. This afternoon, if possible. I know these situations can be delicate. Of course. Would 2 p.m. work? My daughter will be here, and Mr. Morrison as well. After I hung up, Sarah looked panicked. What if they believe him? What if they think I'm being manipulated? Frank laughed. Sarah, your husband just reported you to the police for being influenced by your own mother. How does that sound to you? Insane. Exactly. Don't worry. We have documentation of everything. Detective Morrison turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who'd clearly dealt with family financial disputes before. She listened patiently as Sarah explained the situation, reviewed our evidence, and asked pointed questions about Mark's behavior. Mrs. Sullivan, your son-in-law claims you've been suffering from dementia and that Mr. Morrison here has been taking advantage of your condition to gain access to your assets. Detective, I said, pulling out my phone. Does this conversation suggest dementia to you? Because I can also show you my medical records, my driving record, and my bank statements going back 5 years, all managed independently. And Mr. Morrison, Mark claims you've been coaching Mrs. Sullivan to fabricate evidence against him. Frank smiled. Detective Morrison, I assume you're familiar with financial fraud cases. Would someone coaching a dementia patient produce this level of documented evidence? He handed her the folder containing bank statements, credit card records, photographs, and a timeline that would have impressed a forensic accountant. Detective Morrison spent 20 minutes reviewing everything. When she looked up, her expression had changed completely. Mrs. Sullivan, have you considered pressing charges for fraud and identity theft? We have. We were waiting to see if Mark would cooperate with repayment. Given what I'm seeing here and his attempt to file false reports about you, I'd recommend moving forward immediately. This isn't a family dispute. It's criminal behavior. After the detective left with copies of our evidence, Sarah collapsed onto the couch. He really tried to have you declared incompetent. Even after running away, he's still trying to control the situation. He's panicking, Frank observed. Desperate people make bad decisions. My phone rang. Mark's number. Answer it, Frank suggested, but put it on speaker. Dorothy, Mark's voice was artificially calm. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Mark, I hear you've been talking to the police about my mental health. I'm concerned about you. Frank is clearly taking advantage of your grief and confusion to turn you against your family. Sarah made a disgusted sound. Frank held up a finger, warning her to stay quiet. That's interesting, I said, because the police seemed much more interested in the $60,000 you've stolen from Frank and me. That money was loans, family helping family. Do you have signed loan documents, payment schedules, any legal evidence of these supposed loans? Silence. Mark, I'm going to give you one last chance. Turn yourself in, cooperate with the investigation, and help us recover the money you've stolen. Maybe the prosecutor will consider that cooperation when they're deciding on charges. You're making a huge mistake, Dorothy. All of you. The only mistake was trusting you. You think you're so smart, but there are things you don't know. Things about your precious Sarah that would change how you feel about her." Sarah went rigid. Frank and I exchanged glances. "What things, Mark?" "Ask her about Phoenix. Ask her about the job she really lost and why she needed to move back home so urgently. Ask her about the money that went missing from her employer's account." The line went dead. Sarah was staring at the phone with a look of absolute terror. "Sarah," I said gently. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you, something that's been eating me alive for 2 years." Frank wheeled closer. "Whatever it is, it can't be worse than what Mark's already done." "It might be, because Mark isn't the only one who stole money. And my moving back home wasn't just about helping you after Dad died." The room went completely silent. I was running away too, and suddenly, the last 2 years looked completely different than either Frank or I had realized. "Tell us everything," I said, "from the beginning." Sarah's confession unraveled everything I thought I knew about my daughter's life. She'd embezzled $15,000 from her accounting firm in Phoenix to cover Mark's gambling debts. When the company discovered the theft, they offered her a choice: resign quietly and pay it back, or face criminal charges. "I had 30 days to return the money," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mark promised he'd get it from his business accounts, but there was no money. There never was. His company was failing because he'd been gambling away the profits for months." "So you came home," Frank said. It wasn't a question. "I told you Dad had just died, and I wanted to help Mom through her grief. Really, I was hiding from my problems and hoping Mark would figure something out. I felt like I'd been punched." "You used your father's death as cover for running away from embezzlement." "Yes, and it gets worse." "Of course it did. When I realized Mark couldn't get the money, I started taking it from you. Small amounts at first. A few hundred here and there from your checking account. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd pay it back as soon as Mark's business recovered. But Mark's business never recovered because Mark was gambling away everything that came in." "Right. So I kept taking more. And when the credit cards came in the mail, Mark said we should use those too. Just until things turned around." Frank was eerily calm. "How much of the $60,000 was for the Phoenix embezzlement?" "About $20,000. The rest was Mark's gambling and our living expenses." "So you've been stealing from your mother to cover up stealing from your employer to cover up your husband's gambling addiction?" "Yes." The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. I was looking at my daughter and seeing a stranger, not the manipulated victim I thought she was, but someone who'd been making criminal choices for years. "Sarah," I said finally, "is there anything else?" "There's one more thing. Mark knows about Phoenix. He's known from the beginning. And, if he gets arrested, he's threatened to tell the police about my embezzlement. He says he has evidence that I forced him to help me steal from you to cover it up." Frank laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "So he's planning to throw you under the bus to save himself." "He's already started. That call to the police about elder abuse? He also told them I was the one manipulating you, that I'd been stealing from you for years before he even knew about it. But that's not true. It's true enough. I was stealing from you. And now it's going to look like everything was my idea." I stood up and walked to the window. My neighbors were living their normal lives while mine imploded completely. My daughter was a thief, my son-in-law was a con artist, and I was an old fool who'd been blind to all of it. "Mom?" Sarah's voice was small. "I'm thinking. Are you going to turn me in?" I turned around. "I should. You've been lying to me for 2 years. You've been stealing from me to cover up another crime. You let me think you were a victim when you were actually a perpetrator." "I know. But here's the thing, Sarah. You just told me the truth when you could have kept lying. Mark's trying to destroy all of us to save himself, and you're trying to take responsibility for what you've done." Frank wheeled over to the evidence table. "There's something else to consider. If Mark has evidence of Sarah's Phoenix embezzlement, what else might he have?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, people like Mark don't just collect evidence to use it. They collect it to leverage it. He's been documenting Sarah's crimes for 2 years, probably recording conversations, keeping receipts. Not to turn her in, but to control her." Sarah's eyes widened. "He made me write down everything I took from you. Said it was so we could pay it back accurately. He was creating evidence to use against you if you ever tried to leave him. So he could have sent me to prison whenever he wanted. And now he's planning to do exactly that to save himself." I sat back down, my mind racing. Mark wasn't just a thief and a con artist. He was a predator who'd been systematically destroying my daughter for years while robbing us both. Sarah, do you still have access to your joint accounts with Mark? Some of them. Why? Because if he's been collecting evidence against you, you should return the favor. Frank smiled. I like where this is going. He's been using you both as criminal accomplices while making sure he had evidence to destroy you if necessary. But that means he also has evidence of his own crimes. His phone, Sarah said suddenly. He records everything. Conversations, meetings, even arguments. He says it's for business, but he's been recording us for months. Then I suggest you get that phone before he decides to use those recordings against you. But how? He's not answering my calls. Frank pulled out his own phone. Leave that to me. I have an idea that will get Mark back here very quickly. What kind of idea? The kind that will make him think he's won, right up until the moment he realizes he's lost everything. Frank, what are you planning? His smile was absolutely predatory. Something that will make our Christmas revenge look like a warm-up act. Frank's plan was diabolical in its simplicity. He called Mark and left a voicemail, claiming he'd had another episode and wanted to make amends before it was too late. He suggested they meet to discuss a generous settlement that would make all the criminal charges go away. You think he'll believe it? Sarah asked. Mark believes what he wants to believe, and what he wants to believe is that he can manipulate his way out of consequences. We were right. Mark called back within an hour, suddenly concerned about his father's health and eager to discuss reasonable solutions for everyone involved. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon at my house. Frank had insisted on one condition. Everything would be recorded. For legal clarity, he'd told Mark, to make sure everyone understands the terms. What Mark didn't know was that Detective Morrison would be listening from my kitchen, and that Sarah had already turned over her laptop containing 2 years of Mark's communications about their criminal activities. Mark arrived Friday at 2 p.m. looking confident for the first time since Christmas. He'd clearly convinced himself that 2 elderly people and his guilt-ridden wife would be easy to manipulate. Dad, you look much better, he said, settling into the chair we'd positioned directly across from Frank's recording equipment. I've had time to think about everything, Frank replied. About family, about forgiveness, about what really matters at my age. I'm so glad to hear that. I've been thinking too, about how we can put this whole misunderstanding behind us. Misunderstanding, I repeated. That's an interesting way to describe theft and fraud. Mark's smile faltered slightly. Dorothy, I know you're upset, but when you look at the big picture, we're all family here. Family forgives. Of course. That's why we wanted to record this conversation. So there's no confusion about what we're agreeing to. Absolutely. Transparency is important. Frank leaned forward. So let's be transparent, Mark. Tell us about the gambling. What gambling? The gambling debts that Sarah was trying to cover when she embezzled money from her employer in Phoenix. Mark's face went blank. He glanced at Sarah, who was sitting quietly beside me, then back at Frank. I don't know what Sarah told you, but Sarah told us everything. About Phoenix, about the embezzlement, about your threats to use evidence against her if she didn't cooperate with stealing from us. That's not how it happened. Then how did it happen? Mark? Because we have Sarah's laptop with 2 years of your messages. We have your recorded conversations about managing the old people. We have your documented threats to destroy Sarah if she tried to leave you. Mark was starting to sweat. You can't use recordings made without my permission. Actually, we can. Arizona is a one-party consent state, and Sarah consented to recording your conversations. But more importantly, I added, we have your confession. I haven't confessed to anything. Frank smiled. You haven't yet, but you're about to. Dad, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the choice you're facing right now. You can confess to everything you've done, cooperate with the investigation, and hope for leniency. Or you can continue lying, and we'll let the evidence speak for itself. What evidence? Frank pulled out a thick folder. Your bank records showing systematic theft from both Dorothy and me. Your credit card statements showing charges for your affair. Your phone records showing calls to gambling operations in Nevada. Your business records showing how you've been laundering stolen money through fake consulting fees. Mark stared at the folder. How did you get my business records? The same way we got everything else, by being smarter than you thought we were. Detective Morrison chose that moment to walk in from the kitchen. "Mr. Mark Morrison, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and elder financial abuse." Mark's face went white. "You set me up." "No," Sarah said quietly. "I grew up and stopped letting you use me to hurt my family." As Detective Morrison read Mark his rights, he kept looking around the room like he couldn't understand how he'd lost control of the situation. "This isn't over," he said as the detective put him in handcuffs. "I know things about all of you, things that will destroy you." "Actually," Frank said, "this is exactly what over looks like. You just haven't realized it yet." After they left, the three of us sat in silence for a few minutes. "So what happens to me now?" Sarah asked. "That depends on what you do next," I said. "The prosecutor is willing to consider a plea deal," Detective Morrison had explained before leaving. "Full cooperation, complete restitution, community service, no jail time if she testifies against Mark. And Phoenix? If she pays back the money she embezzled and her former employer doesn't press charges, it stays off her record." Sarah looked at Frank and me. "Why are you helping me? After everything I've done?" Frank answered first. "Because you told the truth when it mattered. Mark never would have done that. And because," I added, "you're my daughter. Family doesn't give up on family, even when family makes terrible mistakes. How do I pay back Phoenix? I don't have $15,000. Frank and I exchanged a look. We'd discussed this already. "We do," I said. "Consider it a loan, at 0 interest, payable over 5 years. Sarah started crying. "I don't deserve this." "No," Frank agreed. "You don't. But you're getting it anyway. That's what real family looks like." "What happens now?" I looked around my house, which for the first time in years felt like home again. "Now we learn to trust each other, one day at a time." 6 months later, I was standing in my kitchen making coffee when I heard Frank's wheelchair coming down the hall. He'd moved in permanently after we realized how much we enjoyed each other's company. Not romantically. We were both too old and too set in our ways for that, but as genuine friends who'd been through hell together and come out stronger. "Morning news is interesting today," he said, handing me the newspaper. The headline read, "Local man sentenced to 5 years for elder financial abuse." Below it was Mark's mugshot, looking nothing like the confident con artist who'd tried to manipulate us 6 months ago. 5 years, I said. More than I expected. Judge said the systematic nature of the crimes and his attempt to blame his victims made it aggravated fraud. Plus, they found evidence of 2 other women he'd scammed in Nevada. Sarah emerged from the dining room where she'd been working on her laptop. She'd gotten a job with a local accounting firm whose owner appreciated second chances for people willing to work hard for redemption. "Did they mention Janet?" she asked. Page 3. Turns out she wasn't just an affair partner. She was helping him launder money through fake business accounts. She got 3 years. Sarah shook her head. "To think I was jealous of her. You were jealous of someone who was helping your husband steal from your mother. That's actually appropriate jealousy." Frank had developed a dry sense of humor about the whole situation. I think it was his way of processing the betrayal. "How's the restitution going?" I asked Sarah. "Phoenix is paid off completely, thanks to the loan from you and Frank. And I've got 3 more years of payments to you both, but I'm actually ahead of schedule." She'd thrown herself into making amends with an intensity that impressed everyone. The prosecutor had been so pleased with her cooperation that Mark's sentencing had included a provision requiring him to pay us back in full when he got out of prison. "Any word from the parole board about visitors?" "Mark can have visitors, but he has to request them. He hasn't requested any of us." "Probably for the best," Frank said. "Prison is supposed to be about reflection and rehabilitation. Hard to do that if you're still trying to manipulate the people you wronged." My phone rang. "Detective Morrison." "Mrs. Sullivan, I wanted to let you know we found something interesting when we cleaned out Mark's storage unit." "What kind of something?" "Evidence of at least 6 other women he was planning to target. Detailed profiles, financial information, relationship patterns. You and your daughter weren't random victims. You were part of a systematic operation." I felt cold. "How systematic?" "We think he'd been doing this for at least 10 years, always targeting families with elderly members who had assets, always using a female accomplice who didn't know the full scope of what was happening. Like Sarah. Like Sarah. The FBI is now investigating him for interstate fraud. This could add federal charges to his sentence. After I hung up, I shared the news with Frank and Sarah. 10 years, Sarah whispered. He's been destroying families for 10 years. And now he's stopped, Frank said firmly. That's what matters. But all those other families, all those people he hurt, who you helped catch by telling the truth, I reminded her. Your testimony is what gave them enough evidence to get the search warrants for his storage unit. The doorbell rang. Sarah went to answer it, returning with Emma and Jack, my grandchildren, who'd become regular visitors since Mark's arrest. It turned out they'd always wanted to spend more time with me, but Mark had convinced Sarah it was too much chaos for an elderly woman to handle. Grandma, can we make cookies today? Emma asked. Of course. Frank, want to help supervise? Someone needs to make sure you don't burn down the kitchen, he said with mock seriousness. As the kids rummaged through my baking supplies and Sarah set up her laptop to work while keeping an eye on them, I realized something had fundamentally changed in my life. Not just because we'd caught the people who were stealing from us, but because we'd learned to trust each other in a way that was deeper than before. You know what's funny? Frank said, as we watched Emma measure flour with the intense concentration of a chemist. What? Mark thought he was destroying our families. Instead, he accidentally created a better one. He was right. Sarah and I talked more honestly now than we had in years. Frank had become the family member I'd never known I needed. The kids were relaxed and happy in a way they'd never been when Mark was around, constantly managing everyone's emotions and interactions. Do you think he planned any of this? Sarah asked, reading over my shoulder as I reviewed our household budget. The way it all turned out? Mark? No. Mark only planned destruction. This, I gestured around the kitchen where my granddaughter was teaching Frank the proper way to crack eggs. This happened because we chose to build something better from the wreckage. No regrets? I thought about it. The money we'd lost, the trust that had been broken, the months of pain and confusion before we understood what was really happening. No regrets, I said. Well, one regret. What's that? I regret it took us so long to realize we could trust each other. Frank looked up from his egg-cracking lesson. Better late than never. Much better, I agreed. As the afternoon sun streamed through my kitchen windows and my house filled with the sound of my family, my real family, the one we'd built from honesty and second chances, I realized this was the best Christmas gift I'd ever received. It had just taken 6 months to unwrap. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.
You know, before I end this video, I want to talk to you for a moment. Not as a narrator, not as someone telling a story, but just as someone sitting across from you, reflecting on what we just experienced together. Because stories like this, they don't just come and go, they stay. They linger in your mind, in your chest, in that quiet space where you start asking yourself questions you didn't expect. I remember the first time I came across a story like this. It wasn't dramatic in the way movies are. There were no grand speeches, no perfect endings, just the woman facing things that felt impossibly heavy, and yet somehow she kept going. Not because she had all the answers, not because she wasn't afraid, but because something inside her refused to give up. And I think that's what makes stories like the one you just watched so powerful. It's not about perfection. It's not about always winning. It's about endurance. It's about what happens when the world tries to define you, limit you, silence you, and you still choose to stand. Even if your voice shakes, even if your steps are slow. The women in these stories, they're not just characters. They represent something real, something that has existed for generations, strength that has been passed down, even though pain, courage that show off, even when it feels like there's nothing left. And if you really think about it, how many times has that kind of strength gone unnoticed? How many stories were never told? How many voices were never heard? That's why this channel exists, to create a space where those stories are not just told but felt, where every moment of struggle matters, where every act of courage, no matter how small, is seen, and where rising again and again becomes something worth honoring. Maybe there was a moment in this story that hit you a little differently. Maybe it reminded you of someone you know. Maybe it reminded you of yourself. And if it did, I hope you hold on to that. Because strength doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like surviving one more day. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like starting over when everything in you is tired. But it's still strength, and it still matters. So as you leave this video, don't just move on to the next thing right away. Sit with this for a second. Think about the journeys you just witnessed. Think about what it represents. And most importantly, remember that every story like this is the reminder of something powerful. That no matter how many times someone is pushed down, no matter how many systems try to break them, there is always the possibility of rising again. If this story meant something to you, I'd love for you to stay with us on this journey, because there are so many more stories waiting. Stories that will challenge you, move you, and maybe even change the way you see the world just a little bit. Thank you for being here with me, truly. And until the next story, take care of yourself, keep your heart open, and never forget how powerful it is to rise, even when it's hard. Bye.